It is more hollow than people understand. There are levels underneath this realm that have lands, that have forests, that have rivers. They have found caves that were huge, that had plant life in it, that had areas that drawn into other levels. You can look it up.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 36. Blue, how are you?
I'm good today, Mike.
Hey, what are we going to talk about today on episode 36?
Well, one of the main things we'll be talking about is correlated smoke in areas that has nothing to do with the Canadian fires itself. There's certain smoke in areas, including Florida, the northwestern perimeters of USA sector, as well as other areas even out of the USA itself. From what was said and brought to my own attention, as well as other individuals. This type of smoke and correlation, fog, if you will, has certain electromagnetic interference and elemental biowave movement streams in itself that can cause certain outer lining effects of COVID, as well as co-aligning effects of messing up with the neuropathy system, the neural system itself.
Wow, that's crazy stuff. That's just crazy. I can't wait to dive in here. Hey, before we do, first of all, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And a reminder, if we're not where you like to get your stuff, let us know and we'll get on that platform. But while you're here, go ahead and please click like and subscribe. And go ahead, don't be afraid. Share it with your friends and so forth. Blue, let's get right into it. Sounds like we got a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. Like, for instance, the so-called Canadian fires, as well as the Maui fires, other fires, those actuation forms in signal were man-correlated stream events, as well as through HAARP and distribution. Their maintainment code has nothing to do with certain other areas that outer align with the smoke. These areas in the indexers itself are nowhere near the points of events that happen in Canada. Those are a bit different, but they were simulated to cause problems. This is similar to the products in HAARP's maintainment code, but it causes the correlation streams through artificial intelligence bots, as well as elemental biowave streams of matter. It's on its own to be made and distributed in these areas.
See, I question the whole thing just from jump. And I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a weatherman at your local TV station, but I just use common sense. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Envision, and I'll put it up in post, envision a map of the United States. They always show the hurricanes going in what direction? From where to where? From the south to the north. They pick up on the Gulf Stream. Everything goes from the south to the north on the eastern seaboard. So if you're going to tell me, Mr. Politician, Mr. Weatherman, Mr. Scientist that's on a government grant, and if they don't follow along with what the government says, they no longer get the grant. So it's pretty easy. That is your green energy policy right there. We have these scientists, just like I had 51 people that knew 45 was a Russian operative, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. 50 intelligence people signed off on a piece of paper that said that. It's the same things, folks. It's the same people. It's the same thing. Am I reading this right, Blue, or no?
Well, the weather people, as well as those that correlate on the network itself, create lies and distribute that. Not saying that all of it's a lie, but there are certain itemization and protocols that they enact out there to hide amongst the masses. So that way the events of what they want to portray outwards are not going to cause much more panic and fear, but would ensnare the minds itself when they're programmed to see it. So that way they're stuck in their own boxes and they're not even able to accept outside of that.
You know, and it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but I mean, it's ironic that a situation like this has arisen, and this is just a microcosm of what the MSM, the mainstream media, is about. They stick to a certain agenda. They always have a problem that they introduce that they just happen to have a cure for. It's like Green Acres, that old TV show. That guy always came around, I just happen to have one on the truck. Well, what they do is they take advantage of an opportunity that they create to push through legislation, to push through a money grab that they can take part of by creating a problem and going, oh, look, we happen to have this solution. We better hurry up and get this solution in play. Folks, chances are, if you're watching, if you're listening, you know better by now. But please, you probably have a friend or a loved one or someone who's an enemy and tells you you're crazy. Go ahead and show them this stuff. Open their minds. Just plant seeds and get feedback from people. Don't argue with people, but just plant seeds with them and listen to what they have to say. Well, why do you feel that way? Well, who told you that? On what account was that? And by the time you get done with the conversation, you'll be a racist, okay? So what I'm trying to say is, don't buy into it, folks. I just hope this doesn't harm us too much. Is there anything we need to do, or is any fear we need to have about this whole situation, Blue?
Well, if military agenda, as well as others in the correlated government, step up to their own plan, the white hats, if you will, against these negative data streams that enact with that circulated fog area distributors, it will lessen upon impasse. We won't have any more of these issues. But I guarantee you that there are some indicators like that that are manually set there for reasons. And this goes out, I know this ain't part of the show, but I'm going to add it anyways, to those needle-like 5G towers. Look like needles scattered abroad in certain areas. They're only putting it and distributing it around hospitals, areas where they have crops, areas where they have churches, and I've been paying attention myself since I'm able to move from place to place and get my information. I've noticed here in the boonies, if you will, that they have put these G tower networks and scatter them around areas like churches, areas like big cities or towns, or even areas where there's just big areas of crops, where they have farms. There are certain type of needle 5G tower. There is a certain distributor that is being categorized around these areas, and they cause more of a higher or lower elemental signal, if you will. And that signal can cause problems for certain things.
So we're saying that these towers are going to affect the food supply. They're going to affect farming.
There's a certain way they can correlate with that. They as well mess with the electromagnetic grid. That's why they're around hospitals and other areas like that. Is there a relationship between the towers and the smoke?
I
don't believe so, no. I believe that has to do with a different type of technology.
Okay. What do we need to do? What do I need to do, or what do I need to know more of about this situation with the 5G towers and it maybe targeting the food supply?
That's just only a part of the targeting. The major part is what they're actually doing physically and what they're corrupted with the crops that way with genetically modified ingredients. But that's only one little part. It's just a skim of the margin. It's more or less, it's a corruption with the communications as well as the electromagnetic fields.
This thing with the towers, is this related to the EBS thing we were going to talk about today that a lot of people have experienced, and there's something more coming up with the EBS? Or is that related?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're in conjuncture with each other because of the electromagnetic fields that play and be put in place with that and the communication standards. But the broadcast system itself pretty much hit the United States of America. And when it hit, it was hitting phones on the 4th. It was hitting radios on the 4th. It was hitting TVs on the 4th, I believe between 2 and 4 p.m. And this type of signals that were broadcast can cause some type of long-term damage to neural standard waves, as well as through their own cooperation can cause disturbances upon the platforms itself. Also, incursion to the events that they had this, they were playing out another role in a warning event, because in an opposite event of what I had seen, Russia was putting out an emergency broadcast, or so-called might. We need to wake up and we need to get these wrong, negative elites out of commission. We need to get them out of commission. Get them out of where they're prioritizing at, including the Biden administration himself. Otherwise, this country is going to end up going downhill even worse. This is warning labels as well for mankind to step down from the way that they're acting between the left and the right. And just like it's similar to what Elon Musk had said. Instead of worrying what's going on, you're dealing with between the left and the right scenarios. Worry more about humanitarianism, working towards the forces of life and what can be maintained for this planet, instead of fighting between the left and the right itself. We need to bring an equality back here.
Now, I've heard, and I don't have the information in front of me, and even if I did, I don't know if I could rely on it in today's networking, in today's news releases, the MSM, so forth. I try to steer away from that, but I did hear that we're going to have a revisit of this EBS system around the 11th of this month, which is a couple days away from when we're recording this. Is there anything I need to know or anything I need to do about this situation? Does it behoove me to turn off my phone? Take the battery out? What is there anything that I should be doing?
I would just not dwell in on the fear and inoculated events that they are causing. Like I said, there's one of two reasons. One, it can cause disturbances upon the neural waves with the holograms itself. Number two, they're putting out physical warning labels of what's going to end up being role played here on this planet unless we maintain equity for the proper elites and put a better substandard here.
It's interesting to me that we're talking about the EBS, we're talking about the smoke, and both of these things seem to be very, very conveniently placed and very conveniently timed out. My question is when we always seem to go back to this, whether it's on this planet or in the universe in general, it's basically almost like a good versus evil thing all the time. Does this fall into those same category? It's a good versus evil thing.
Pretty much. I mean, we need to put in a better signal event for this planet. And it's going to put in equality. Because with the left and right agenda, all it will do is bring everything downhill for the realm. What happens when you have to make a stand down with the left and the right, between good and bad? You have to create an equality, and you have to put formality and the right laws upon there, setting into the examples that humans are a higher species than what they feel that they are. You are not apes, and you don't need to bring yourself downwards like this and the planet that you are on.
Speaking of the planet, you had discussed in the show notes here something about the springs. Tell me more about that, please.
Well, Agartha inner worlds co-align with several types of springs here on this planet. There are springs that serve underneath areas in Florida. There are springs that serve and correlate in areas in the ocean's perimeters, or not in the ocean, but springs closer to the lands that deal with that, and islands. There are islands in the ocean's perimeters that have springs. These springs go underneath and outer align to the areas that go to the inner worlds. Why do you think that a lot of the waters that come out from underneath are clean? Even with the springs that are all over the other places of the planet. It is more hollow than people understand. There are levels underneath this realm that have lands, that have forests, that have rivers. They have found caves that were huge, that had plant life in it, that had areas that drawn into other levels. You can look it up. That's just the beginning of what goes and dwells up from underneath. That's why they protect these springs too. They're so clean that they manifest from other levels from underneath the planet. Now just think about it. If we can level that out and maintain equity on top, we can bring from what's underneath to this level a clean atmosphere, a better understanding. Because I guarantee you that there be civilizations still living underneath us that have maintained their worth.
Now, we've discussed Agartha before, and we've discussed Hollow Earth, and we've discussed connections and tunnels, and that's exactly what we're saying here again today. My question is there a time that you think there'll be some disclosure involving this? Does this happen to be tied into any other disclosure, maybe?
Well, with the inner worlds and the mass awakening, the on-mass awakening going on with mankind within the last few years, is pretty much already polarizing their perimeters outward. But in order for something like Agartha to even happen, for an inner world to happen to the outer realms have to be fixed, and the diagnosis streams of the negative events here be discontinued.
Is there anything I can do as the average everyday person to heighten my awareness or do something positive toward this effort to continue to have the clean water come up through the springs and continue to get things in a proper balance, or help win that fight of good versus evil? What can I do as the average everyday person to contribute or be positive in this?
Pick up after yourselves. Keep it clean in your environments. Respect the nature and the animals and the wildlife. Because when you start messing around with things on the ground and in the air where you're at, it's going to start screwing things up from underneath. And underneath is still clean. Of course, there are a lot of areas, CUMBS, underground military bases, and the boring companies through Elon Musk and other distribution scenes, but we have the paranormal side too. And the paranormal side coincides with the life force side. And the reason why I say that is because of the existence of the bioelementals itself that exist within the aether stream, within the soul. This planet is connected to the foundations of life. Humanity's got to learn to protect the environment, the creatures itself, if they're going to maintain movement forward. They have to do it for the levels that they are on, if they want the levels from underneath being maintained as well. There's not much clean water on the on levels on the surface. And we all know why, and it's getting worse.
My question is there certain, I know as a society here in the United States, we've taken precautions and we've reserved certain areas and certain national forests, and there's state parks, and there's springs like you're talking about that are in preserves and preserved areas. Is there anything else? Is there any other places? Do we need more of those type places?
Yes, we need to maintain equity for the foundations of life and not distributing what certain administration wants to distribute. And that's creating foundations of ripping up the environment itself and taking away. There is no equality when it comes to that standard, and they even know that. There are many types of technologies, including quantum technology, that can be placed for mankind in the environment that will not harm, like the current indexers are playing out on their roles, especially bringing all these people from other countries in, creating all these millions of jobs, foundations of working in industry and this and that. I mean, it's creating more havoc for the planet itself. And if we can't see that, look around you. Are you breathing healthy? Are you healthy at all? Are you getting sicker? I wonder why you're getting sicker. Putting all those fumes in, destroying all the lands like we are. I mean, it's okay to take away land, but when you take away, you got to give back. Otherwise, you're taken away, and eventually the planet will be gone.
To me, I try to break things down to the simplest, the most common denominator to make it easier for myself to understand a lot of these complex issues that we talk about. But again, it all comes down to the same thing. It's a good versus evil. We create a problem, but then we conveniently have this solution that we're going to profit from. But don't worry about that. Just go ahead and sign it. You can read it later. So it's crazy to me. Hey, it's almost time to move on here to our SCP, the SCP Foundation. Let's talk about this one here we were going to talk about today, the Roaring One.
Well, the Roaring One. Now, doesn't he look a little familiar? Ever heard of the movie Deadpool?
Yeah.
And some of the affirmative actions that this being holds are somewhat similar to the guy who had been playing in Deadpool, the movie. His skin is charred, pretty much a dead-on affirmation, but he has DNA substructures that have a formality code of healing very quickly. This being is on lockdown perimeter, and they have him in a containment cell. There have been incidences with this incorporated being, and the discern of the nature makes it more enraged, kind of like similar to Deadpool itself. So because of that, and because of the corporations, what this being is, do not put women around it, because it has a way of getting into ladies' minds. It has a way of getting into the formational codes of coordination with animals. It is a sign-off way of, it's a temetric way of using his mind between him and the wildlife himself as well. It's an Aramaic ancient Greek being, so the depiction node dated back numerous years. And scar tissue hair does not grow back. It stays in that directed node of event.
So
a very strong build, a very powerful being. It could throw others instantaneously, very easily if enraged. This being could get enraged very easily because of the properties that it beholds, because it can heal instantaneously during events, and because it is a way to motivate its mind into that of females or other acquisitional events. It can pose a threat until further evaluation is maintained for this type of person. Believe it or not, there have been people like this that may have been human at one time, and their evaluation tones may have been circulated for something they either have done in a laboratory or that they have self-diagnosed with other types of advanced technologies or equipment that have caused this. If I'm not mistaken, this person had something done with himself a long time ago, and self-diagnosis turned it into a paranormal event. There are many beings, many persons throughout the ages that have similar acquisitions or indicators that pushed them into something else.
You know, I find it interesting you had made the comparison to Deadpool. I'm just curious, does the Roaring One have this sarcastic wit about it? And more curious is, we've always talked about you can't throw everything out at people at once. You need to have a gradual disclosure. You need to do things at certain levels, because if you throw something all out at somebody, their heads will explode. They just will. They won't be able to grasp it. So if you look back over in our lifetimes, you've seen, and we've talked about this before, the connection with Hollywood and the connection of disclosure there with the Marvel series, the Incredible Hulk, all these laboratory things going. And this is exactly what you're talking about here. And I find that fascinating. My question is the name, the Roaring One, does it have a physical loud sound that I'm going to hear?
I was just going to get to that too. Yes. Okay. Its voice and replication, if it gets enraged, it can acclimate at a higher sound of effect that could cause, through its shout, deafening and shattering of glass. It can cause someone to lose their hearing instantaneously, and it can blow off steel doors itself.
That's crazy. That's just crazy. Wow. Now, if for some reason this got loose and I'm confronted, will I know this being when I see it?
Well, I think by date they only have one person in reposition, and if I'm not mistaken, this may have been someone who had had a subjugation upon their own being that caused this. So, like I said, there have been certain individuals throughout the timelines, because of malfunctions with science or malfunctions with other types of paranormal events, could cause an enactment tone with this. I mean, even if you think about it with the astronauts in space, I am sure that some of them, when they come back sick or something happens that they self-diagnose in an outer stream, there have been certain types of elements or matter itself out there that could cause them to get a certain cosmic sickness or certain type of psychic awareness or data stream that would move them a little bit differently than mankind when they enter, especially if they are co-created or going into a certain portal event or wormhole indexer and they're traveling. There are a lot more things out there in space than people understand. And some of those things in space can cause issues for others, or actually diagnose in mainstream the DNA fraction code of that hologram to grasp an extra particle of DNA itself. So this person, the Roaring Man, most likely will be stuck where he's at, watched under the watchful eye of the Foundation in a certain cell. This type of being, I highly doubt anyone's going to come across another.
Good. What other SCP are we going to talk about today?
639, the Distorted Man. 639, Caucasian male, approximately 1.6 meters in height, weighing 78 kilograms. Is viewed simultaneously on all angles, regardless of viewer's position, being in front of the figure of the viewer's front, back, sides, and so forth. Attempt to capture the subject with the camera in any sort of photographic medium yields a heavily distorted figure and reposition on the photograph itself.
Is this something where if I did see it, I would like adjust my eyes or try to put on glasses or something? Is it appear to move very fast, or how is it distorted?
Well, think about the mirage. and how they deal with it in certain areas in the desert. And you're noticing mirages. And then your eyes play games on you. Well, think about the distortion that would actually polarize into. There are fields of effect that hit with the mirror indexers that causes that distortion to be seen. Because of the camera, it creates a much wider effect. With your eyes, the effect varies. With this type of being, it has a vital role of being able to manipulate the refined alloy waves that go through the distribution scenes between these types. And that includes the mirror effects itself.
Is this why, like, when we see or hear paranormal things, that certain electronics will respond in a certain way to verify presence of maybe a paranormal activity? Is this something similar where the camera picks it up only a certain way because of the electromagnetic waves? Or am I making sense there, or no? Am I understanding correctly?
A little bit different. It causes a defined effect through the mirrorings of the portals of the camera itself. The mirage, when it deals with certain apertures and deserts, play a little bit of a different role. Now, with this being was an actual person and was recovered in Texas. It was recovered from a hospital. So self-diagnoses, when they had found it under the care of a doctor, they were picked up by agents under the medical transfer. It was a male, and this type of being, when you have self-eye exposure to it, it can cause severe extreme eye strain and mild paranoia. So if you're exposed physically to this being, the camera does a different effect. To take in a photo, it's going to cause a rippling effect. Physically, when you're after a term and you're face-to-face with this being, it's going to cause you to get paranoia. It's going to cause you to persist with a deeper eye strain. It has extra alloy substructures in its DNA that can manage that, like a bubbling effect itself. Kind of like rippling when you're pressing down on water. It creates that type of inlet effect. It's an in-between being. That means its substructure can be physical, and then it could go in between the physical and the elemental movements of the liquidation. And when it's in between physical and liquidation, it can cause these movements to happen, similar to smoke itself.
So to be clear, could this be a good guy? Could this be a bad guy? It's in between?
I believe it's neutral, but it does cause problems to people, and it causes mental illnesses. So if I were the foundation, I would keep diagnosing and see what needs to be done with this person or being, because sound like this person and or being may have been messed with at some point, and it's causing paranormal issues for other people.
I'll tell you this. Go ahead.
I would not go in face-to-face with it because it downsizes the neural nodes of most of mankind.
What else do we have to report from the SCP Foundation?
SCP-659, the species of bird, like a heron, resembling a heron. Displays a modular intelligence native to America. Only a single flock is known of this SCP so far. There have been unconfirmed sightings, though, in Europe, self-diagnosing with these beings. In terminology, when one is alone on its own, it serves a higher intelligence close to that of a human. And when they start coordinating, and you got to think about this with ravens or other types of black birds nowadays, where they have that super amount of intelligence and biopsis effects of how they get it, how they manage it. There are similar types of attributes like that, but their possessive stream diagnosis that they can do a lot of things through the neural standard ways and enactment tone that humans could possess. Now, there's subsistence, and they are able to subsist on any form of meat, although whenever possible, will still consume fish. And with these types of beings, because of their combined intelligence, when they get in coordinating with the flocks, they have no choice because they can cause massive damage, and they can coordinate with each other and cause massive problems upon foundations dealing with humanity or other types of substructures itself, even other animals. They could be a good reaction or a bad reaction depending on these types of species, these avians. It's like I said with this, avians, like how they had, the scientists had put in different types of birds and correlated as domesticated avian birds to mankind. They possess different types of knowledge. I mean, it's not far off that there would be more of a higher paranormal aspect for certain avian structures like these to have that and motivate it forward, even more than the ravens would itself.
You know, it's ironic because not long ago I was watching some documentary somewhere about blackbirds, and I can't remember correctly if it was ravens or crows or what, but they did a study, and these birds actually have unique facial recognition. So they can look at a human and they can identify them, and based on previous interaction or experience, they can tell whether it's a good human or a bad human just by looking at their face. So the bird's up in a tree on a wire or whatever, and they see a recognizable face, whether it's good or bad, they know the difference. My big question is I've also heard in the recent past theories of people saying that birds aren't real, that they're all these intelligence gathering beings. Is this where that comes from?
Well, I mean, you got to think about DNA, and you got to think about the aether form, the soul itself. It can move from one trajectory code to another. It can be set manually into that progressive stream. We think about parrots, and this goes to another thing with these flocks. They're able to speak human language when they get together, and they create their certain hive, if you will, their hive mind. They can start simulating human language and learning that language and affirmation tones. Don't think I'm crazy when I'm saying this, because if you look at parrots and you look at other birds, they can do the same thing. They can learn human language and they can understand it. These are different because their levels are much more advanced than a regular avian.
Is there anything I need to fear from this communal aviation intelligence?
Well, they're still learning. The foundation is from it. And because it's such a small flock and only been correlated in certain designated tones, they're curious as to find out what they're capable of, what they can do. I wouldn't be too concerned. I doubt they're out to attack anybody, just like any other avian, except their reciprocal language tones and their mind tones are a bit more advanced. So that I would be concerned about. As long as systems is managed and we're not affirmating a negative tone towards their way, all they have is a higher indicator of a soul than a regular avian. But there are not many of these species around. I wouldn't be surprised if they come from the inner worlds itself. A lot of species do, and they run more of a paranormal dialect tone, as well as what their hologram could pull outwards.
You know,
I would not be surprised.
I like the way you brought that full circle. It goes right back to what we were talking about before, about Agartha and the Hollow Earth and etc. I'm fascinated by this SCP Foundation. Again, I understand that some, it's out there as a role play, it's out there as a communal type thing, but at the same time, I'm convinced more than ever that this is just like everything else that the government's involved in or that they don't think we're ready for. You hide things in plain sight. Oh, yeah, all that stuff's just... Yeah. Folks, believe it or not, don't believe it. I think it's interesting either way, and I'm glad we're able to bring that to light here on the show. We're almost running out of time here, and I want to make sure we get everything else in here. Is there anything to report from the your positions with the Space Force and the Federation?
Well, like I said earlier, humanity needs to get to their conclusions and start acting right. Stop nitpicking between the left and the right and know the agendas of what can be maintained in the middle. We are going to end up in a war we don't want otherwise. Militaries need to stand up to the way that they're acting and start really protecting mankind and each other and doing the right things. The governments need to start making the right laws and subjugate those laws into action and create better for the environment, for the creatures, and for humans itself. And to prioritize the effect. While we are dealing with this negative bioelemental war, we all need to make a stop for the agenda that is being rolled out against mankind. Correlating what we can set into a better frequency for everybody. It's time to take that stand.
Well, it's powerful stuff there. It's a powerful statement. You might want to rewind that and go back and listen to it again, folks, because that's what I do every week. And by the way, you can do that on any one of our shows. When we reference something on a previous show, you can find those things indexed on our videos and on our podcasts here. You just go back to that time stamp and it'll take you right to that subject if you want to revert back to something else. So let's get right into ET of the week.
Yes, the Sirion Cevit. A dominating species acknowledged for cooperation in intelligence and government affairs. 8 feet to 8 inches to 10 feet to 8 inches in length. Focus motions to advance neuro, telepathic communication, and substandard Archon technologies. And they have closer relatives to certain Greys. They have relatives of certain species of the Greys that help with these Archon technologies. These arcane or technologies are distributors that help even through with human affairs in certain areas of technological achievements itself. Directed protectors of the cosmic grids incorporated with settled events. They have dark to light brown gray and skin variation with close to none body fat because of the maintainment and their lean mobility causes them to be able to run quicker. They're not having that excess fat that others would require.
Is this a being that I should be concerned with? Is this a good guy, a bad guy?
They've worked with governmentals in the United States as well as others on this planet, and as well as a foundation through the Federation, if you want to believe it or not. There is another name for that through the cosmic engraving system, and they run through with others on protocols as well.
Wow.
They have had pictures in the past of people in the White House or other circular codes with similar beings that look like this, really tall, really slender, and they would just stand there next to the person in general. Or dealing with cooperation, just like the events, the extraterrestrial events that were played out beforehand that we talked about. Their cooperations of what higher beings self-diagnose in communications between themselves and the governmentals. It's on its own, behind the scenes. This has been going on for many years, and there are many types of higher beings that have cooperated with the government. You need to do your homework, people, because it is the truth. If y'all think you got these and known these technologies on your own, no. Absolutely not. That's why it is sped in process within several years. How the hell else would you have granted this and been given this?
Wow. You know, it's always fascinated me because I've always I've always subscribed to the theory that that's what happened. Because if you look where we've come from in a technology standpoint, just in the past 50 years, or even the past 30 years, we've overcome leaps and bounds. And it seems that shortly after the so-called Roswell incident, we started gaining these technologies. And again, you can't just throw that technology. You couldn't throw hyperspace or cell phone technology out to people in the 1940s or 50s. Their minds would have exploded. So what do? They came out with cell phone technology at a certain point, and it was big and bulky. Then they came out with smaller and more capable and more battery and more life and more memory. Then they come out with videos and pictures and cameras, and you could do everything you want in the world by this cell phone. Do you really think that this just came upon some human beings one day? I'm convinced more than ever that these technologies are assumed or granted to us by these extraterrestrial beings, and as part of the government's control of that information, they trickle it out. Because again, we don't want people's heads to explode because they wouldn't understand it all. So this is definitely fascinating to me. I'm glad we're able to do ET of the Week every week, Blue. This is wonderful stuff. And you know what? Just like that, we're out of time. Blue, thank you so much. Episode 36 in the books. Great stuff today.
Thank you, Mike.
All right.